Namaskar. I am very proud to be associated with this venture called NPTEL, and I shall be taking a course called Consumer Behavior. Before I go into the details of this course, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Sangeeta Sahani. I am an associate professor at the Vinod Gupta School of Management at IIT Kharagpur. My areas of specialization are marketing management, behavioral issues in management, to some extent quality management in education and quality management in services. I shall be teaching this course as a part of the NPTEL venture at IIT Kharagpur. As far as this course is concerned, this is an elective course in marketing management, and it is offered as a postgraduate course at various business schools across the country. This is a course which is generally available to postgraduate students as an elective in the 4th semester. Some places it is also offered in the 3rd semester. This particular course shall be covered as a video course in 40 hours, and I will be going through this entire course, which I have divided into 8 modules. Each of these modules will be broken up into a number of sessions, and before I start, I'll just give you a brief outline on the course and the course contents. This particular course, as I said, is a video course on consumer behavior in many places. This particular course is also called buyer behavior. So whether we call it buyer behavior or whether we call it consumer behavior, it would amount to basically the same thing. It is the difference lies in the very perspective or the orientation with which you are studying the buyer or the consumer. This particular course we will be dividing into 8 modules as module 1, 2, 3 and so forth, and the topics that we will be covering are as follows. We will start with a topic on a session on introduction to the study of consumer behavior, where I shall be speaking about the discipline as such, what is consumer behavior, how it has evolved as a discipline in its own. It's very interdisciplinary, so we will be studying the nature of the subject, we will be speaking about the scope of the study, and we will speak about the relevance of the subject to marketing and to a marketer per se. This particular session, this particular topic would be covered in 2 sessions. Thereafter, we will move to module 2, which is market research and consumer behavior. Here we will talk about how market research is related to consumer behavior and how consumer behavior relates to market research. In fact, they both work together. Until and unless you go in for market research, you will never be able to understand your consumer and formulate your strategies accordingly. And on the other hand, until consumer behavior itself contributes to the study of marketing research. So they both go hand in glove and they help each other. So we will be speaking about this. We will speak about how what are the tools, what are the techniques, how do you collect data, because and how do you go in for a research basically to study the consumer, to study the consumer segment, to understand him, so that you can predict his behavior, you can control his behavior, or you can kind of get the best out of understanding consumers. So we will be studying this in 2nd module. In the 3rd module, and of course we will be covering this module in 2 sessions. In the 3rd module, we will move to market segmentation and positioning, which is something again which we will focus upon, because in 2 sessions we will be completing this. The focus here will be basically consumer segments. How do we segment the market, how do we identify segments in the market, how do we target some of these segments, how do we position our product in the minds of the consumer, and how the study of consumer behavior or how the study of buyer behavior helps us in formulating proper strategies for market segmentation, targeting and positioning. This shall be completed in 2 sessions. Then we will move on to module 4, where we will be studying about consumer decision making process. We will be speaking about the general process which is followed in consumer decision making. It's an elaborate process in its own, and where we find that although we have a few stages in the decision making process, but the number of situational, environmental, individual and the rest of the variables that affect the process are are many, and they really have a big impact, huge impact on consumer decision making process. This we shall be covering in a total of 2 sessions again. Then we will be moving to module 5, where we will be speaking about the models of consumers. Here we will be speaking first about the various views or the various orientations with which researchers have studied this discipline. We will speak about the different views, different approaches. We will come to the basic models, we will come to the general models, and we will come to some specific models which have been proposed by researchers from time to time, which actually contribute to the discipline of consumer behavior. We will be analyzing these models, and we will be speaking about the implications of these models on the study of consumer behavior. We shall be covering this in a total of 4 sessions. Consumer behavior as a study, which we will just see, is impacted by a large number of influences. These influences could be psychological influences, which are more individualistic, and they are more dependent from person to person, and are also referred to as individual determinants. Apart from there are other influences which come in the form of sociological influences, where consumption behavior and consumption patterns are actually affected by friends, peers, colleagues, and social influences in the social environment around you. So we will be studying the impact of psychological influences and sociological influences on consumer decision making. Module 6 will basically speak on the psychological influences on consumer decision making. We will be speaking about consumer motivation, needs, wants, moods, emotions, learning, perception, personality, self-image, self-concept, consumer perception, and we will also speak about communication. So each of these is going to have an impact on the manner in which a consumer approaches the marketplace and takes decisions with respect to the consumption behavior and his consumption patterns. So we will be speaking about these psychological influences. Thereafter we will move to the sociological influences, which also have a big role to play, the role played by our reference groups, be it family, be it friends, be it our social class, or the culture, the subculture, cross-cultural influences, opinion leaders. So all of this we will be dealing with in module 7. Module 6 we shall be covering in about 19 sessions, which will be a major chunk of the course, and module 7, which deals with the sociological influences, we shall be covering in a total of about 7 sessions. Finally, we will come to the last module, which is diffusion of innovation, which will basically speak of how new products are get diffused into the public or into the society or into the market. What happens when new products are introduced into the market, and how do consumers go in for adoption of such new products? So we will be speaking about something called diffusion of innovation in terms of diffusion as well as adoption. So this is something which we will be covering in about 2 sessions. This in a nutshell is this particular course which we shall be doing in the next few hours. And every session will follow some questions for discussion, for investigation. It will also follow some frequently asked questions with answers alongside. So we will begin this course now, and we shall be speaking about this particular course. We'll start with module 1, and we'll speak about the introduction to the study of consumer behavior. So let us speak about this particular subject here, and we'll speak about as I said, we'll start with module 1, which is an introduction to the study of consumer behavior. We will be covering this in 2 hours, and here we'll be speaking about a few topics which will be as follows. We'll start with defining the consumer behavior. What is consumer behavior? We will define consumer behavior. Then we will come to studying the nature and scope of the discipline. What is it that characterizes this particular discipline? Why is it relevant, and how does it affect a marketer? So where all does it operate? Does it operate only in consumer markets? Does it operate in business markets, or does it operate in government markets, and so forth? So what is the scope of the study, and what is it in the market that we will study? We will speak about how we are going to study the buyer, how we are going to study the seller, how we are going to study the environment as such. So this is as far as the nature and scope of the subject is concerned. Then we will go about discussing the applications of consumer behavior, and how does it, where all does it apply, where all does the knowledge of this particular discipline lie. Why should we study this subject at all when we are actually studying a subject called marketing, and marketing includes everything? So why should we actually have another paper called consumer behavior, and I should be studying this particular subject? So we'll talk about this. Then we will see how this particular subject, which is highly interdisciplinary, has evolved. Okay, we will speak about the nature, the different disciplines which have contributed immensely to this study or to this subject called consumer behavior, and we will be seeing how this particular subject has evolved and what is its relationship with the marketing subject as such. So we will be speaking about all these topics in this particular module, and to start with, we start with session 1, which will cover the first 2 components of the entire module, which will be defining consumer behavior, and secondly the nature and scope of consumer behavior. So let us first start with what is consumer behavior. Okay, now when I start with this subject, first I like to just explain that every individual has his own needs and wants. Every individual is unique in his own form, in his own self, and has his own needs, he has his own wants, he has his own preferences. Now the marketer's job is to basically satisfy these needs and wants. And how does a marketer do this? He does it through offering products and services. So it is through products and services that a marketer will be able to help a consumer satisfy his needs and wants. But just as I said, consumers are unique, they are different, and they have different consumption patterns, they have different consumption behavior, and for a firm to actually survive, for a firm to compete, especially today in a very highly competitive and dynamic environment that all companies face, it's very essential that in order to survive, in order to compete, in order to grow, it's very important that companies basically identify such needs and wants. And that is one part of it. The other part of it is that you provide the desired satisfaction in a form called a product, in a form called a service, in something which is valuable, and you provide this value more effectively and more efficiently than the competitor. So this is very important for a marketer to be able to understand what is it that my customer requires, because it is only after studying what is it that the customer requires will he be able to design a product or service offering which will be value actually would define as value in the eyes of the customer. We have to remember as marketers, as academicians, as researchers, that what is value is something which is customer dependent. The definition is itself customer dependent. It cannot be defined from a marketer's point of view. It is actually to be framed, it is actually to be proposed from a customer's perspective. So while we think of providing value to the customer, it is very important that we understand him better, and a comprehensive and a very meticulous knowledge of consumers is very essential for a firm to succeed, for a firm to survive. And actually it is through understanding the customer, through understanding what is value to him, that a marketer would be able to design an offering accordingly. And once he designs an product or service offering accordingly, he gets an edge over other competitors. He satisfies the customers better, and today we are moving beyond satisfaction. We would say he delights a customer, and the customer tends to become loyal to the brand or to the marketer. So it's very important that we have a very meticulous and very comprehensive knowledge with respect to the customer, and herein lies the essence of this subject or of this discipline called consumer behavior. It's an interdisciplinary subject which emerged as a separate field of study in the 1960s, and since then it has evolved. lot of researchers, many researchers, many academicians have contributed tremendously to this field, and it has grown as a subject on its own. Now, let us define what consumer behavior is. When we speak about the definition of consumer behavior, we would say that it is the interplay of forces that take place during a consumption process within a consumer's self and his environment. So, it is basically the interplay of forces that takes place during a consumption process within a consumer's self, within his own, and the environment that surrounds him. Now, this particular interplay and this particular interaction takes place between three things. One, the knowledge or the cognition within a consumer, the affect or the feelings within a consumer, and the behavior or the conation or the act, the actual act of purchase or of not to purchase. So, basically it's an interaction that takes place between three elements in the form of knowledge, affect and behavior, which actually constitutes this subject or this discipline. Consumer behavior as such also continues through the pre-purchase activity to the post-purchase experience. So, it is through the process begins pre-purchase, much before the purchase activity actually takes place. The process begins and the process starts, and it continues till much later after the purchase. So, the process is something which starts pre-purchase and moves towards the post-purchase experience, and it includes within its ambit the stages of evaluating products and services, acquiring them, using them, and also disposing of these goods and services. So, if we define consumer behavior, the scope is vast. An interaction between forces within the consumer and his environment. The interaction within the individual takes place at three levels: the knowledge, the affect and the behavior. The process starts pre-purchase and ends post-purchase, and it basically, the entire ambit includes stages of evaluating alternatives, purchasing them, using them, and then finally disposing of these goods and services. Now, when we are going to speak of consumer behavior, we are going to include consumers who are personal consumers and who are business consumers. Personal consumers here we would mean B2C, the business to consumers or the end consumers. Personal consumers will be end consumers, and organized business or industrial consumers or organizational consumers will be B2B, which is business to business organizations. So, we are going to speak about the end consumer. We are also going to include and speak about the organizational consumer. Now, consumer behavior basically will also include within its purview, as I said, the interplay between cognition, affect and behavior, which will go on during a consumption process right from pre-purchase to post-purchase, right from selecting, using and disposing of goods and services. Now, let's elaborate a little bit on cognition, affect and behavior. What is cognition? Cognition basically includes the knowledge, the information processing, the thinking part. Okay. So, it basically speaks it includes the mental processes which are used by a consumer as and when he is exposed to a stimuli, as and when he is exposed to a marketing stimuli. And this marketing stimuli could be anything. It could be people, it could be events, it could be places, it could be objects, it could be things. Any and all of these act as stimuli, and when a consumer gets exposed to this stimuli, he obtains some information. So, some mental processes get involved in the whole process of information, and basically when we talk of cognition, it is the mental processes involved in processing of information, thinking and the interpretation of the stimuli. So, it is processing information, thinking and interpretation. So, one is process information, two is interpret it. Here in our case, as I just said, the stimuli will be a marketing stimuli, and this marketing stimuli will take form in the marketing mix, which is the 4 P's. So, the marketing stimuli could be the product or service offering, the price, the place, the manner in which it is distributed or sold, or the manner in which it is promoted, advertised, or marketing stimuli could also be just the brand. Okay, so brand here is also a stimuli. So anything and everything to do with the product or service offering is going to act as a marketing stimuli, and it is going to be exposed, get attended to by a consumer, who will then begin processing the information cues with respect to the stimuli, and he'll start processing the information, comprehending it, retaining it in his short term and his long term. So this is what is the cognition as far as cognition is concerned. The second part is the affect. Affect is the feelings part, the mood, the emotion. It could be in the form of favorable and unfavorable attitudes or predispositions. It could be in the form of emotions, it could be in the form of mood states, anything on everything, any kind of emotions, any kind of mood states that actually arise when a person is exposed to a particular stimuli, a particular marketing stimuli. So what happens when he is exposed to a stimuli? Apart from the information processing that starts, there are also some other mood states which come into play, emotions which come into play. These are highly subjective in nature, and will be actually manifest in the form of favorable and unfavorable feelings towards the stimuli and the corresponding emotions with respect to it. So this is the affect part. Then we come to the behavioral part. Now behavioral part is the only visible part in this entire, in the three components, amongst the three components, cognition, affect and behavior. The behavior is the only visible part, because it manifests itself through the act of purchase. Okay, you either buy a product or you don't buy a product. It's something which is very overt and you will be able to observe it. So this is what is behavior, and this is what is the visible part. We will not be able to basically, understand or perceive the cognition, or we won't be able to see the effect. Yes, in some form we will be able to see the effect through one's body language, but otherwise we won't be able to measure the effect. But here in the case of behavior, it's something which is the visible part. We'll be able to observe it, we'll be able to give it a form, and in our case this behavior is actually the purchase activity, to buy or not to buy, and to buy it again probably. So the interaction here takes place between the three of them: cognition, which is the mental or the cognitive effect that is taking place with respect to information processing and comprehension and retention; emotions, which is feelings and emotions, which are the mood states which come along with the stimuli. We are exposed to a stimuli and there is a corresponding reaction, which is in the form of an emotional state, a mood state, favorable or unfavorable, like or dislike. And the third is, as we said, the behavior part, which is the act of purchase. So in a nutshell, if I say that I get exposed to an advertisement of a particular say potato chips, and I'm hungry also, so it immediately triggers off a need. I start thinking about which brand to buy and where to get it from, and the mental state starts functioning, okay, and it gets immediately, it rouses kind of a tension that I should run towards the nearest store and buy. But the kind of emotion that got aroused with the through the advertisement was something of like. If the advertisement was, or if the promotion which came as a stimuli was something which was disliked by me, or was something which gave me a very negative mood state, in that case I would not immediately act out and purchase. So this mood state is going to actually have an impact on the behavior. So the three of them, cognition, affect and behavior, work together. If I am exposed to something which is nice, I like to read more about it, I like to hear more about it. Probably after reading more about it, after gaining more information about it, after hearing more about it, I develop a positive mood state to go and purchase it. I develop a liking or a good feeling to buy. So the cognition, affect and behavior work together. In some cases it may be that the cognition leads to an affect, leads to a behavior. In some cases we will see as the course proceeds, the sequence may not follow that way. Cognition may lead to a behavior and then to an affect. Okay, so it is actually the relationship between the three components is something which is very reciprocal and interactive, and not necessarily in this order, which is cognition, affect and behavior. It could be cognition, behavior and affect, or it could be cognition, affect and behavior, and so forth. So these are the three components or constituents on which the entire consumer behavior study is actually made. Okay. So, now let us come to a few definitions on consumer behavior. Schiffman and Canuck basically define consumer behavior as the behavior that consumers display in the searching for, purchasing, using, evaluating and disposing of products and services that they expect will satisfy their needs. Another definition is given by Loudon and Bitta. They say it is the decision process and physical activity engaged in when evaluating, acquiring, using or disposing of goods and services. There is another definition which is given by Wells and Prensky, which I like to quote here. The study of consumers as they exchange something of value for a product or service that satisfies their needs. So, these are a couple of definitions with respect to this particular subject. Now, let us come to the nature and scope of consumer behavior. So, we will speak first about the nature of consumer behavior, then we will be speaking about the scope of the study. Now, as far as the nature of consumer behavior is concerned, first, number one, the subject, as I said, deals with issues related to consumption, effect and behavior in consumer behavior, and this interaction between cognition, effect and behavior actually always takes place amidst an environment. And what is this environment? This environment could be either the external environment, or it could be also the individual determinant. So, this interplay between cognition, effect and behavior is not something which will happen close and watertight. It is going to be impacted by two things: one, individual determinants, and two, environmental influences or the external environment. So, let us first come to the individual determinants. When we speak about the individual determinants, we are basically speaking about motivation, need, involvement, perception, learning, memory, personality, self-image, self-concept, attitudes and individual decision making. So, these are all influences, they are all factors which act as influences on the interplay of cognition, effect and behavior. Whatever is happening through the interplay of cognition, effect and behavior is going to be actually impacted by individual determinants. That is why we say that because no two individuals are the same, consumer behavior can never be same. Okay, because people are different in terms of individual determinants. What motivates me at a particular point of time may not motivate another. I may go in for a particular color or particular style of clothes which may be very different to what another person would go through or would want. So, because our needs are different, our wants are different, moods, states, emotions, degree of level of involvement, the manner in which we perceive things, the manner in which we frame our beliefs and attitudes, because all of this is different, they are going to act upon the cognition, effect and behavior differently and variedly. So, these are individual determinants which affect consumer behavior. We shall be going and studying, we shall be going about these individual determinants and studying them when we study the psychological influences on consumer decision making. So, these are actually very individualistic and will vary from person to person, and that is why we call such influences as, either we call them as psychographic influences or we call them as individual determinants. The second kind of environment which a person faces is in terms of the external environment, and here the external environment basically speaks about some part of it is sociographic in nature, in terms of influences which come from the family, from friends, from peers, from colleagues, from social class, from culture, subculture, cross culture. This is one part which is an external influence. Another kind of external influence we will see will come from situations or will come from the marketer himself. You know, while my customs or my traditions may expect me to behave in a particular manner and I may be, for example, required to wear a particular dress on a particular occasion, but just because that particular color which I am supposed to wear is not available, I may decide on something else. So, here comes in the situation. Also, I may have learned, I may have been taught that to be very careful about lot of things, to read package labels on the product, very carefully, to check out for prices or to check up for expiry dates, etc. But because I'm lack of time, I'm short of time, I don't have the time to do it. So these are all a kind of situational influences which will affect consumer decision making. So external influences will be sociographic in nature, and some part of external influences which we will see will be situational or external in nature. But here in this particular course, when we study external environment, we will basically focus on the sociographic components and how the reference group, social class, and culture, subculture, how these affect. So we will study this such discipline through, we will be studying the impact of two influences. One will be individual determinants and individual influences in the terms of psychographic influences, and the second will be in terms of sociographic influences or external environment. Okay. So the second thing which characterizes this study is that this particular study can be this particular study can be conducted either at a macro level or at a micro level. So whether it is analyzed at the individual level or at the group level will determine whether it is being studied from a micro perspective or a macro perspective. When we will focus on a single individual, or we are basically talking about a very micro approach to this study. We are trying to understand him, we are trying to assess him. Something which goes very helpful in today's age of customization and one-to-one marketing. But when we study the consumer segment, or when we study the market as a whole, there we will be studying this subject from a macro point of view. So this particular study can be conducted both at a micro level and at a macro level. Third, the subject is highly interdisciplinary. It is borrowed heavily from the field of psychology, sociology, social psychology, anthropology and economics. To start with, when we speak about the study of the individual, when we speak about the determinants, individual determinants in consumer behavior, we basically borrowed heavily from the study of, from the discipline of from subject of psychology. Most of it, in fact, most of consumer behavior you will see has borrowed itself from psychology. When we speak about sociology, when we speak about for example, when we speak about the study of the group, when we speak about study of groups, dynamics, group dynamics, be it family, reference groups, opinion leaders, culture, subculture, and the impact of these on consumer behavior, we are speaking about social groups. So it is basically study of groups. We basically start. The subject is interdisciplinary in nature. So as an interdisciplinary area of study, it's borrowed heavily from a large number of disciplines, be it psychology, be it sociology, be it social psychology, anthropology, economics. When we speak about the study of the individual, when we speak about the individual determinants which impact consumer behavior, we have actually borrowed us heavily and extensively from psychology. On the other hand, when we speak about the study of groups or group dynamics and the impact of groups, there consumer behavior borrows from the study of sociology. When we are talking about social psychology, yes, the discipline also borrows extensively from social psychology. That is, how do individuals operate in groups? When you're shopping alone, for example, we are very different. But when you're shopping with others, we are very conscious about what we buy, where we buy from, and when we often get influenced by other people who have gone along with us for shopping, be it our family, be it our friends. So the manner in which an individual operates in the marketplace, the manner in which he behaves in a marketplace, when he is with people, when he is with other people, groups of people, then we've actually borrowed from social psychology. The society also has an impact on our buying patterns, on our consumption behavior. It could be in terms of the social influences, it could be in terms of social class influences, it could be in terms of influences that come from culture, subculture, cross culture. So here we've actually borrowed from the field of anthropology. And of course, buy anything you need money. So the study of how you're going to spend your money what you're going to buy, how you're going to prioritize your resources, your wants in terms of the limited resources that you have, what you kind of actually we borrowed from the study of economics. So, economics basically, when we are speaking about income, when we are speaking about savings, when we are speaking about how income has an impact or savings have an impact or purchasing power has an impact on consumer behavior, how consumers decide what to buy and in how much, and when they decide about how they're going to actually spend the limited money or the limited resources, financial resources, on the unlimited needs and wants, and how they're going to prioritize those needs and wants. When we are doing that, we are actually borrowing from the field of economics. So, as a study, you will see, as a discipline, this particular subject borrows extensively, very heavily from the social sciences, the different social sciences, and much of the contribution to the field of consumer behavior has in fact come from researchers and academicians who have been either psychologists or sociologists or social psychologists or anthropologists or economists. The next, the next thing which basically characterizes this particular study is that consumer behavior is highly dynamic. The three components of cognition, of effect, and of behavior, either as individuals, within individuals, or when individuals in groups, keeps on changing. So does the environment which surrounds the consumer, or the consumer groups keeps on changing. So the subject is because the environment is very dynamic, the subject has to be very flexible, has to be very, very dynamic. There is an interplay between the three components which I have spoken of: cognition, effect, and behavior. And this interplay takes place within an environment which is very complex, very dynamic, quick changes taking place. And so, this particular subject is something which is very evolving. It's highly dynamic in nature. The particular subject is actually also, we should say, when we are talking about the nature of the subject, something very important is the process of exchange. What is of most importance to a marketer is that the consumer enters into a transaction or an exchange with the marketer. How does this exchange or transaction take place? It takes place through the act of purchase. Until and unless there is a purchase, everything else is worthless for a marketer. What he wants is an exchange or a transaction, and then he wants this exchange and transaction on a continued basis. So, this particular subject of consumer behavior involves a process of exchange also. It involves the decision choice and the purchase decision, the act of purchase. So, this act of purchase also has to be beneficial for both the parties, be it the buyer, be it the seller. So, when we are going to study consumer behavior, we are also going to focus on the act of purchase. So, we will be speaking about cognition, effect, behavior, the environment in terms of individual environment, the external environment. We will be speaking about how things quickly happen in the marketplace, how complex the environment is, how dynamic the environment is, and because of this complexity and dynamism, the immediate impact comes on the three components of cognition, effect, and behavior. So, cognition, effect, and behavior continually get impacted by the environment outside, and ultimately we will be what is important is the act of purchase. So, we will be speaking on the act of purchase as well. As a field of study, the study it is very descriptive, analytical. It's descriptive because it explains consumer behavior and decision making in the context of the environment and in the context of external influences. But it's also analytical and interpretive because it tries to study and analyze the behavior of people either in single or in groups, and it uses a large number of quantitative and qualitative tools to understand consumers, to predict consumption behavior. So, this particular subject is something which is very, very descriptive. It's also very, very analytical. So, as far as the discipline is concerned, it is also a science and an art. The subject is both. It borrows heavily from social sciences, as we've just discussed, and it uses quantitative and qualitative tools. So, it kind of blends both the sciences and the art. So, it is both a science and an art. So, if we quickly recap recapitulate the nature of the study, we will see that one, it could be studied at a micro level and at a macro level. Two, it is something which is highly it's basically reflects an interplay between cognition, effect and behavior amidst an environment. 3, the subject is highly interdisciplinary. 4, it is dynamic. 5, it involves a process of exchange. 6, it is both descriptive in nature as well as analytical in nature. And 7th, it is a science as well as an art. Now, let us come to the scope of the study. What does the scope of the study entail? The study of consumer behavior basically deals with understanding consumption patterns and behavior. So, it includes within an ambit number of questions and queries, like which we all have to address. As marketers, as researchers, as academicians, it's very important that when you have to understand your consumer, when you have to predict his behavior, and when you want to actually formulate strategies to be able to control that behavior, it's very important that you have ready answers for each of these. You should be able to understand what does the consumer buy. Of course, it's going to be goods and services, but why does he want it? Why does he buy it? Because it's going to help him satisfy a need or a want. When do they buy it? When do they buy it? Do they buy it any day of the week, or is it do they buy it daily, or do they buy it weekly, or is it something which is bought on a monthly basis or on an annual basis, or it is something which is bought on occasions? So, when does he buy? Where does he buy? Okay. Next question which we should be able to answer is, where does he buy? Where does he prefer buying? Does he prefer buying from small shops or large shops? Is it the organized retail or is it the unorganized sector? Does he prefer buying from conveniently located stores, or is he ready to travel far enough to buy certain specialty goods or specialty items? How often does he buy? What is the time interval between two purchases? And how often does he use it? What is the frequency of usage? Because all this is the how often, the question with respect to how often and how often they buy it and how often they use it is also going to have an impact on future purchase decisions. So, these are all basic questions or queries which lie within the scope of the study. Now, let us come to the basic components which are a part of the scope. There are components. First is decision making. Decision making means the cognition and the effect, and it will include stages of need recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase activity and post purchase. So, this is with respect to the decision making. There is another which is the actual purchase. Actual purchase means buying the good or service. Okay. So, it is a physical activity, very visible, and it is actually the result of an interplay between individual and environmental variables and their impact on cognition, effect and behavior. So, basically the third component which we will focus off in this study is individual determinants and environmental factors which affect consumer decision making. So, if we see, we will be focusing on 3 basic components: the cognition effect, 2 behavior, 3 the individual determinants and the external influences. Cognition and effect is actually the decision making part, that he goes in for a process, the decision making, if you see, I'm sure if you've done a basic course on marketing, you all know that the 5-stage procedure where we start with, the consumer decision making process starts as a 5-stage process, need recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase activity and post purchase. So, this decision making here is going to be impacting or going through all these 5 stages and will involve cognition and effect. Then comes the behavior in the form of the purchase activity or the visible part as such, and then the third is the individual and the external influences on consumer decision making. There is also another component which deserves mention here, which we will be speaking of again in a module when we do when we study the consumer decision making process. We will be coming discussing this component again. It is buying roles. So, we are speaking of the buyer and the various roles that the buyer performs. there are different roles which a buyer performs, and these roles are in terms of the initiator, influencer, decider, buyer and user. Now, initiator is one who initiates a need or starts the process. Okay. Influencer is the one who is going to influence the choice of a product. Decider is one who is going to actually decide, yes, I have to buy this. Buyer is the person who actually goes to the shop and enters into the transaction. And user is the person who is going to be using the product. Now, if you start speaking of all these 5 roles, the 5 roles may be played by a single person or they may be played by different people. And it's also going to be such that a person may assume some or all of these roles. Which of these roles he is going to perform when, and which of them he will perform or he will not perform, will actually depend upon the product in question. For certain kinds of products, person X in the family may be the initiator or the influencer or the decider or the any of these roles. For another product category, person Y in the family may be. For example, for a product which pertains to the kitchen, the lady of the house may be an initiator, maybe a decider. But for product and probably the user, for example, if it is a mixer grinder which she is going to use to blend things and finally cook, so she is going to be the user. But for a product like, for example, a television set, the different members in the family will assume different roles. Okay, and it's going to be used by everybody in the family. So there is no clear-cut, watertight, compartmentalized definition of who will perform which of these roles in this. It's called going to be based on situation. It's called going to be based on the product in question. Now, what is our focus when we are studying consumer behavior? Which is the role which we should basically focus on? Okay, so yes, the answer is the actual buyer, and if another role to be said, the user. Why the actual buyer? There is a reason to that. It is the user who, it is the decider who basically goes in for the purchase activity. At home, you may have decided that you want to buy a brand X of a television. The father of the house or the head of the member family goes to the store, end up buying brand Y, because probably he felt that at the store his decision changed. So the decider could have decided something, but the buyer bought something else. And what did the buyer do? He entered into a transaction with the retailer or with the dealer and paid the money. So he has bought a brand, decided on a brand, the decision on the brand was taken at home, but the actual activity happened at the store. So the actual transaction takes place at the store. Sometimes it may also happen, you may decide, and by the time the person reaches the store, he may decide to postpone his purchase. Okay, so decision may have been made, but the act of transaction never took place. What is important to a marketer is the act of transaction. So we will basically focus on the buyer. We will also focus on the user, because once the product is purchased, it is used by the users, who may be one, who may be many. Okay, and it is their experience in terms of satisfaction or dissatisfaction which is actually going to affect future purchase. Okay, so we are going to study the buyer and the user. Buyer, why? Because it's a current state. You want to enter into an exchange process. Okay, he is the one who enters into the exchange process, the physical act of purchase, the transaction, the exchange process. And the user, why? Because it is a user who is going to actually provide a feedback and have a say in future purchases. If he is satisfied, he will go in for another purchase of the same brand later on. If he is dissatisfied, he is going to be able to change his brand. So the marketer has to focus on two people, the buyer and the user. This is not to say that the other roles are minuscule or they don't have much of relevance. The others are important as well, and the study of consumer behavior will give equal importance to them as well. But if you are asked to choose and pick and choose, one or two of those roles, then of course it is going to be the buyer and the user. consumer behavior, that's why we say focus specifically on the buyer and often on the user, but it also understands the impact of other roles, because until unless a need is initiated, until unless influences come about, until unless a decision is made, things won't move further. Until unless there is a need, how do you start the process at all? So the other roles are equally important, but from the point of view of the study of consumer behavior and the scope of the study, we will be basically emphasizing more on the buyer and the user. Okay. The other component which is equally important in the study of consumer behavior is the buyer and the seller. As I just said, the buyer we have been speaking of, but the seller is equally important. It is he who provides the desired satisfaction in the form of a good or a service offering. They enter into an exchange process, and this exchange process leaves both parties better off. It's value to both. The customer gets a product or a service which he actually uses to satisfy his need or a want, and the seller gets his money in return, which is going to it's profit for him. So it leaves both parties equally better off, and it actually results in value creation at both ends. So as far as the components of the study are concerned, we will be speaking about decision making, the behavior, actual purchase, individual determinants, external influences, buying roles, the buyer and the seller. So each of these we will be speaking of in detail as we go about in this particular course. Now let us come to some references. I conclude this particular session here, and we will be speaking about the other components of module 1 in the next session. But before I conclude, I will just come up with a list of references and suggested readings. There is the Engel, Blackwell and Minyard et al. They have written a book called Consumer Behavior. Then Loudon and Della Bitta on consumer behavior, Peter and Olson and Wells and Prensky. But the Bible remains Schiffman and Canuck. They have done wonderfully well as a textbook, and I would recommend all of you to basically go through this book. It's a good reading. Not to say that the others aren't, but equally important are the others, but more easily available probably in your libraries and in your resources around you. You will be easily be able to get a copy of Schiffman and Canuck. With respect to this particular session, what could be frequently asked questions? Well, one, how do you define consumer behavior? Two, what are the different, list out the individual determinants and environmental influences that affect consumption behavior. Another question that you may be asked is the subject interdisciplinary, and what are the basic components in the consumption behavior? So these are some questions which pertain to this particular session, and having gone through this particular session, you should be able to have answers to these questions. Just as I conclude, I'll also like to offer to you a test or a quiz in the form of some questions where we have true, false, and like for example, consumer behavior includes within its ambit only the actual purchasing of products and services. So is it true or is it false? So I mean, the answer to this, of course, you should be able to give me. It is false. Then there is a question, another true false statement. The consumer includes both personal consumers and business, industrial or organizational consumers. Well, the answer to this is true. Third, the discipline studies consumption patterns at micro levels only. So yes, the answer is wrong. It's a false. It studies both at the micro level and at the macro levels. The environment, number 4, the environmental factors affect decision process indirectly. Well, what do you have to say on this? Is it a true or a false? Well, it is a true. They affect them indirectly. Yeah, it's a true statement. Now we come to multiple choice questions. So consumer behavior may be defined as A, the interplay of forces that take place during a consumption process within a consumer's self and his environment. B, a decision process and a physical activity during consumption process. C, a study of the various stages of evaluating, acquiring, using and disposing of goods and services. D, all of the above. Yes, the answer is D. Okay. Number 2, consumer behavior focuses specifically on initiator, user, buyer or decider. The answer is the buyer. It is specifically on the buyer. Okay. Now, we come to the fill in the blanks. Number 1, the study includes within its purview the interplay between cognition dash and behavior. Cognition, effect and behavior. 2, the actual purchase activity is the result of interplay of many individual and blank determinants. So, individual and external determinants. C, third, the study of consumer behavior is both a science and an art. Okay. So, these are some fill in the blanks, and now we come to some short answers. So, the first question which I can answer, which I would like to ask you is, mention the various stages of decision making. So, the various stages of decision making are need recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase decision and post purchase behavior or post purchase activity. Second question, what are the various buying roles? Okay. So, what are the various buying roles? The various buying roles are initiator, influencer, decider, buyer and user. Question 3, what are the various disciplines which have contributed to the study of consumer behavior? Well, you have the answer: psychology, sociology, social psychology, anthropology and economics. And fourth, what are the various environmental influences that affect consumer behavior? So, environmental influences will be in terms of the sociological influences, family, social group, social class, reference groups, okay, culture, subculture, cross culture, national influences, regional influences and so forth. So, with this I come to the conclusion of session 1, and we shall be continuing with this module in session 2. Thank you.